The sun beat down on dusty plains as Jebediah and his gang rode hard toward the First National Bank of Redemption. Jebediah, a man known for his quick draw and even quicker temper, adjusted his hat, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple. Today was the day they finally hit the big time. Inside the bank, chaos erupted. Guns blazed, and screams filled the air. Jebediah moved like a viper, securing the loot while his men kept the townsfolk at bay. But something fell off. The resistance was too weak, the guards too slow. Suddenly, a shotgun blast ripped through the air, catching Jebediah in the side. He stumbled, clutching his wound, and saw Silas, his supposed right-hand man, standing over him with a cold smile. "Sorry, Jeb," Silas sneered, "but this town ain't big enough for the both of us, and the sheriff offered me a deal I couldn't refuse." Pain exploded in Jebediah's head as Silas's men turned on him and the rest of the gang. The last thing he saw was the sky spinning before darkness consumed him. The robbery wasn't just a failure. It was a setup, a brutal betrayal orchestrated by those he trusted most. They left him for dead, a casualty of greed and backstabbing, buried beneath the very town he sought to rob. Darkness. That was all Jebediah knew. A crushing weight pressed down on him, stealing his breath. Panic clawed at his throat. He tried to move, but his limbs were heavy, unresponsive. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth, and something else, something metallic like blood. He was buried alive. Memories flickered, Silas's sneering face, the deafening shotgun blast, the ground rushing up to meet him. They hadn't just left him for dead. They had ensured it. A wave of nausea washed over him, followed by a surge of adrenaline. He had to get out. He had to breathe. He had to make them pay. His hands, still clumsy and weak, scraped against the rough wood above him. A coffin? No, too shallow. Just raw earth piled high. He pushed, but the weight was immense. Dirt trickled down, filling his mouth and nose, choking him. He coughed, a strangled, desperate sound that was swallowed by the earth. He had to focus, conserve his energy, think. Slowly, painstakingly, he began to claw at the dirt above him, pulling it down, creating a small pocket of space. The air was thin, but it was enough. Enough to fuel the burning rage that now consumed him. He would escape this grave, and Silas and everyone else involved would learn what it truly meant to be buried alive. The dirt was heavy, unforgiving. Each handful Jebediah managed to dislodge felt like a victory, however small. His fingernails cracked and bled, but he didn't stop. The pain was a reminder of his betrayal, a reminder of his purpose. He pictured Silas's smug face, the sheriff's cold eyes. They thought they were rid of him. They thought they could bury him and forget him. They were wrong. The air grew thinner, and his lungs burned. He clawed faster, driven by a primal instinct to survive. The weight above him shifted, threatening to collapse his meager pocket. He braced himself, pushing upward with all his might, feeling the earth give way just a fraction. He repeated the process again and again, each movement a testament to his will. The world above remained stubbornly out of reach. Doubt crept in, whispering insidious lies. Maybe they were right. Maybe he was destined to die here, buried and forgotten. But then he remembered his father's words. "A man's only worth is his word and his grit, son." Jebediah snorted, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. He had lost his word, but he still had his grit, and that was enough. He pushed onward, fueled by the memory and the burning desire for revenge. Jebediah's head broke the surface. He gasped, sucking in ragged breaths of cool night air. The dirt clung to his face, caked in his hair, filling his lungs with each desperate inhale. He blinked, trying to clear his vision, the world a blurry mix of dark shapes and distant stars. He pushed himself further, his muscles screaming in protest, until he was finally free. He lay on his back, chest heaving, the weight of the earth replaced by the vastness of the sky. The moon, a sliver of silver, seemed to mock his predicament. He was out, but he was far from safe. The gunshot wound and his side throbbed, a constant reminder of Silas's treachery. He was weak, vulnerable, and alone. But he was alive. He sat up slowly, wincing at the pain that shot through his body. The world swam for a moment, then steadied. He looked back at the shallow grave, a dark scar on the landscape. It was a symbol of what they had tried to do to him, and a promise of what he would do to them. He spat out a mouthful of dirt, the taste bitter and metallic. "You ain't seen the last of me," he rasped, his voice hoarse and raw. The hunt had begun. Getting to his feet was a battle in itself. Jebediah's legs trembled beneath him, threatening to buckle with every step. The gunshot wound at his side, pulsed with agony, each breath a searing reminder of his near-death experience. He stumbled forward, his body screaming for rest, but his mind driven by the singular purpose of vengeance. The town of redemption was miles away, a distant glimmer of false hope on the horizon. He knew Silas and the sheriff would be expecting him to be dead, giving him a slight advantage. He had to reach redemption, uncover the full extent of their betrayal, and make them pay. He walked with a limp, favoring his wounded side, the pain a constant companion. Thorns tore at his clothes, the sharp barbs mirroring the bitterness in his heart. He was a ghost, risen from the grave, his very existence a threat to those who sought to destroy him. He scanned the horizon, wary of any sign of pursuit. The desert was a harsh mistress, offering little in the way of comfort or refuge. He needed water, food, and a place to rest, but those were luxuries he couldn't afford. Every moment spent recovering was a moment Silas had to solidify his position, to erase any trace of his treachery. He pressed on, fueled by anger and a burning desire for justice. He would reach redemption, and he would make them regret the day they left Jebediah for dead. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the dusty ground into a furnace. Jebediah stumbled onward, his vision blurring, his throat parched. He rationed the last of his water, the meager sips doing little to quench his thirst. Flashbacks assaulted him, laughing with Silas over a game of cards, sharing stories around a campfire, trusting him with his life. Each memory was a knife twisting in his gut. How could he have been so blind, so foolish? He remembered the others too. Big Joe, a gentle giant who always had his back. Maria, the fiery saloon owner who patched him up after every brawl. Were they in on it too? The thought sent a cold shiver down his spine. He couldn't trust anyone. He stumbled upon a dried-up creek bed, the cracked earth offering no respite from the heat. Despair threatened to consume him, but he pushed it back, fueled by the image of Silas's face contorted in surprise when he realized Jebediah was still alive. He had to make it. He had to uncover the truth. He had to make them pay. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert, Jebediah finally saw it. The faint glow of redemption's lights in the distance. He had a long way to go, but he was closer than ever. He pressed on, his limp a little less pronounced, his resolve a little stronger. He was coming home, and he was coming for blood. Jebediah slipped into redemption under the cover of darkness, a ghost haunting the streets he once roamed freely. The town felt different, colder, the laughter and camaraderie replaced by suspicion and fear. He needed information, but he couldn't risk being seen. He found Maria's saloon, the familiar scent of whiskey and cheap perfume a small comfort. He slipped in through the back, avoiding the prying eyes of the patrons. Maria was wiping down the bar, her face etched with weariness. "Jebediah," she gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief. "They said you were dead." He put a finger to his lips. "Not yet, Maria, but I need your help." He explained what happened, the betrayal, the burial, the burning need for revenge. Maria listened intently, her expression growing darker with each word. "I knew Silas was a snake," she said, her voice low, "but I didn't know he was capable of this. I heard some talk after the robbery, about a deal with the sheriff and someone else, a man named Fingers Finley. He's a gambler, always looking for an edge. He was seen talking to Silas a few days before the heist. Fingers Finley, the first name on his list." Jebediah's eyes narrowed. "Where can I find him?" Maria hesitated. "He usually plays cards at the Golden Nugget. But Jebediah, be careful. Silas has eyes everywhere." I'm counting on it, Jebediah said, a grim smile spreading across his face. The hunt was on. The Golden Nugget was a den of vice, filled with the clatter of chips, the haze of cigar smoke, and the hushed whispers of fortunes won and lost. Jebediah scanned the room, his eyes settling on a man with slicked-back hair and nimble fingers shuffling a deck of cards at a high-stakes table. Fingers Finley. Jebediah approached cautiously, his hand instinctively resting on the handle of his revolver. Finley didn't notice him at first, too engrossed in the game. "Finley," Jebediah said, his voice low and menacing. Finley looked up, his eyes widening in surprise. "Do I know you?" "You know Silas," Jebediah replied, his gaze unwavering. "And you know about the bank robbery." Finley's face paled. He tried to stand, but Jebediah was too quick. He grabbed Finley by the collar, pulling him close. "What did Silas promise you?" Jebediah hissed, his grip tightening. "What was your part in all of this?" Finley struggled, but Jebediah's grip was too strong. I just told him when the bank shipments were coming," Finley stammered. "That's all, I swear." Jebediah didn't believe him. He slammed Finley against the table, scattering cards and chips. The other gamblers scattered, their faces a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. "Liar," Jebediah growled. He pulled out his revolver, the cold steel pressed against Finley's temple. "Tell me the truth, or this game is over." Finley's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, but Jebediah held him firm. The threat of the revolver was enough. All right, Finley stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "I told Silas about the shipments, like I said. But that's not all. The sheriff, he wanted Jebediah gone. Said you were getting too big for your britches, stirring up trouble he didn't like." "And?" Jebediah pressed, his voice dangerously low. And Silas said he had a plan. He was going to double-cross you during the robbery, make it look like a shootout gone wrong. The sheriff promised him a cut of the loot and your share of the territory." "Who else knew?" Jebediah demanded. Finley hesitated, then blurted out, "Only one other. A bounty hunter named Coyote Kate. She was hired to make sure you stayed dead. She was supposed to follow Silas and finish the job if you somehow survived." Coyote Kate, a name that sent a shiver down Jebediah's spine. She was ruthless, efficient, and always got her mark. The conspiracy was deeper than he imagined, reaching into the highest levels of power in redemption. Jebediah lowered the revolver, but his gaze remained fixed on Finley. "You've been helpful, Fingers," he said, a chilling smile spreading across his face. "Maybe too helpful." The next morning, Fingers Finley was found slumped in an alleyway, a single bullet hole between his eyes. The whispers started immediately. Jebediah was back. Fear gripped redemption. The sheriff, usually a figure of authority, grew increasingly paranoid, his eyes darting nervously at every shadow. Silas, emboldened by his newfound power, tried to maintain a facade of control, but the cracks were beginning to show. Jebediah moved like a phantom, striking from the darkness, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. Each kill made him stronger, more ruthless, his movements more precise, his resolve more unwavering. The wound in his side, though still painful, no longer slowed him down. He was driven by a singular purpose: to avenge his betrayal and cleanse redemption of its corruption. The townsfolk watched in hushed silence, their loyalties divided. Some feared Jebediah, viewing him as a vengeful spirit, a harbinger of doom. Others secretly cheered him on, seeing him as a symbol of rebellion against the sheriff's tyrannical rule. Maria, despite her fear, continued to aid Jebediah, providing him with information and shelter. She knew he was walking a dangerous path, but she also knew that redemption needed him. The air grew thick with tension, the scent of death mingling with the dust and despair. Redemption was on the brink of a reckoning, and Jebediah was the catalyst. The whispers turned to shouts. Jebediah was coming, and he was bringing hell with him. Years ago, Jebediah wasn't an outlaw. He was a young man with honest dreams, working his family's ranch, trying to carve out a life in the unforgiving West. But a ruthless land baron, backed by the corrupt sheriff, wanted their land. They framed Jebediah's father for a crime he didn't commit, and when Jebediah tried to defend him, they killed him. That day, something inside Jebediah snapped. He watched as his family's home, his inheritance, his future, was stolen from him. He swore vengeance, but he knew he couldn't fight them alone. He joined a group of outcasts, men and women who had been wronged by the same system. They formed a gang, bound by a code: loyalty above all else, and protect the innocent. They robbed from the rich and gave to the poor, becoming legends in their own right. But somewhere along the way, the lines blurred. The code was forgotten, replaced by greed and ambition. Silas, seduced by the promise of power, abandoned the principles they once shared. The robbery was supposed to be their last score, a chance to finally leave the outlaw life behind. Instead, it became their downfall. Now, as Jebediah stalked the streets of redemption, he realized he wasn't just seeking revenge for himself. He was seeking revenge for the code they had betrayed, for the innocent people they had forgotten, and for the man he used to be. Jebediah knew Coyote Kate wouldn't be easy. She was a seasoned tracker, a deadly shot, and a master of disguise. He found her camped outside of town, nestled amongst the rocks, a fire crackling low. He approached cautiously, but she was already waiting for him, rifle in hand. "Jebediah," she said, her voice cold and emotionless. "I heard you were back from the dead. Seems I have a job to finish." The fight was brutal, a dance of death under the pale moonlight. Kate was fast, her movements fluid and precise. She knew how to use the terrain to her advantage, disappearing and reappearing like a phantom. Jebediah, though stronger than before, was still wounded and weary. He relied on his instincts, his years of experience, and the burning rage that fueled him. They exchanged blows, bullets whizzing past their heads, knives clashing in the darkness. Kate managed to disarm him, sending his revolver spinning into the dust. He lunged at her, tackling her to the ground. They wrestled, each trying to gain the upper hand. Kate was strong, but Jebediah was driven by a force she couldn't comprehend. He finally managed to pin her down, his hands around her throat. "Who hired you, Kate?" he rasped, his voice filled with fury. "Tell me, or this is where it ends." Kate struggled, her eyes wide with defiance. "You'll never take down the sheriff," she choked out. "He's too powerful." Jebediah's grip tightened. He wouldn't let her die without knowing the full extent of the conspiracy. "Tell me." Kate coughed, struggling for breath. "It wasn't just a sheriff," she gasped, her voice weak. "Someone else. Someone closer to you." Jebediah's grip loosened slightly, a knot of dread forming in his stomach. "Oh, Maria," Kate whispered, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and pity. "She was feeding the sheriff information about your plans for months. She knew about the robbery, and she knew about the code." Jebediah recoiled, as if struck. Maria? The woman he trusted, the woman who had helped him, the woman he thought cared for him? It couldn't be true. "You're lying," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm not," Kate insisted. The sheriff promised her protection, a new life, away from all this violence. "She just wanted out, Jebediah. She thought you were too far gone." The revelation hit Jebediah like a physical blow, shattering the last vestiges of trust he had left. Maria's kindness, her concern, her unwavering support. It had all been a lie, a carefully constructed facade to gain his confidence and betray him. The pain of this betrayal was far greater than any gunshot wound, any shallow grave. It cut deeper, twisting the knife in his soul. How could he have been so wrong about someone? How could he have been so blind? He released Kate, his face etched with disbelief and despair. "Get out of here," he said, his voice hollow, "before I change my mind." He turned and walked away, leaving Kate gasping for air, his heart broken and his spirit crushed. The world around him seemed to spin, the lines between friend and foe blurring into a nightmarish chaos. Jebediah found the sheriff in his office, surrounded by his deputies, a bottle of whiskey on his desk. The sheriff looked up, his face a mask of fear and defiance. "Jebediah," he said, his voice trembling, "I knew you'd come. You betrayed me," Jebediah said, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. You betrayed everything we stood for. I did what I had to do to survive, the sheriff retorted. You were a threat to my power, to the order of this town. Order? Jebediah scoffed. You call this order? This town is built on lies, corruption, and greed. The deputies drew their weapons, but Jebediah didn't flinch. He knew they were just pawns, puppets in the sheriff's game. It's over, Sheriff, Jebediah said, his hand hovering over his revolver. Your reign of terror ends here. The sheriff laughed, a hollow, desperate sound. You think you can take me down? You're just one man, Jebediah, and you're already half dead. Maybe, Jebediah replied, but I'm the only one standing between you and justice. The showdown was swift and brutal. The deputies fired, but Jebediah moved like a whirlwind, dodging bullets, returning fire with deadly accuracy. He took them down one by one, their bodies collapsing to the floor. Finally, it was just Jebediah and the sheriff, facing each other across the room, the air thick with tension and the scent of gunpowder. The final act was about to begin. The sheriff reached for his own weapon, but Jebediah was faster. A single shot rang out, echoing through the office. The sheriff slumped back in his chair, a look of surprise frozen on his face. Jebediah stood over him, his chest heaving, the revolver still smoking in his hand. The silence was deafening. He had done it. He had avenged his father, his gang, and himself. But as he looked around the office, at the bodies of the deputies, at the lifeless eyes of the sheriff, he felt no sense of triumph, no sense of peace. Only a hollow emptiness, a profound sense of loss. He had achieved his revenge, but at what cost? He had become a killer, a monster, just like the men he had hunted down. Had he truly avenged the code, or had he simply sunk to their level? He walked out of the sheriff's office, leaving the bodies behind, stepping out into the dawn. The townsfolk were waiting, their faces a mixture of fear and hope. They looked to him for leadership, for salvation. But Jebediah knew he was no savior. He was just a broken man, haunted by his past, forever changed by his quest for revenge. He had brought justice to redemption, but he had lost himself in the process. He had won the battle, but he had lost the war. The question now was, what would he do with the rest of his life? Could he ever truly escape the shadow of his past? Could he ever find peace? Jebediah rode out of redemption, the rising sun casting long shadows behind him. He didn't look back. He had no place there anymore. The town had been cleansed, but at a terrible cost. He wasn't riding towards a bright future, a new beginning. He was simply riding away, trying to outrun the ghosts of his past. The faces of those he had killed haunted him, their eyes accusing him of betraying the very code he swore to uphold. He rode for days, weeks, the landscape blurring into a monotonous cycle of dust and despair. He slept under the stars, ate what he could find, and spoke to no one. He was a solitary figure, a wanderer, forever marked by violence and betrayal. One day, he came across a small ranch, nestled in a valley, far from civilization. A young woman was tending to the horses, her face weathered but kind. She looked at him with curiosity, not fear. He stopped, hesitant, unsure of what to do. He could keep riding, disappearing into the vast wilderness, or he could stay, try to find some semblance of peace in this quiet corner of the world. He dismounted, his legs stiff and sore. He looked at the woman, at the horses, at the rolling hills surrounding the ranch. He knew he could never truly escape his past, but maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to live with it. He took a deep breath and spoke, his voice raspy and unused. "I'm looking for work," he said. "Do you need any help?" The woman smiled, a small, hesitant smile. "We always need help," she replied. "What's your name?" Jebediah hesitated, then said, "Call me Jeb." He had a long way to go, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could find redemption.